I'm going to explain how to get rich. Getting rich requires patience. So let's start practicing right now. You're going to have to be a little bit patient to hear how to get rich from me. Getting rich is not like you think it is. Getting rich takes a really long time. People don't want to become rich, they want to get rich. There's this element of time that they don't want to face. They're poor now, and they want to be rich tomorrow. So sure, you can buy a lottery ticket and get really lucky, and you could be rich tomorrow, but you wouldn't really be rich. You would be poor with a lot of money, which is a big difference. Most people who win the lottery don't have the financial capabilities, understanding, the good habits to handle that money wisely. Instead, they will spend it lavishly as though they were rich. But they're not. They're poor. They're now poor with a bunch of toys. And before they know it, they'll be poor with a bunch of toys and no money. Or maybe they gave it away to friends and family. They thought they were rich, but they never were. And besides all that, you're not going to win the lottery. You might think you might, and I guess you might, but you won't. I'm telling you right now, you won't. Better to let go. And similar get-rich-quick ideas like, I'm going to start this great business idea I have and get venture capital and all this stuff. Just, it's a gamble. If you like gambling, go gamble, but call it what it is. That's not how you get rich. Here's the problem with getting rich is you can't feel it. It's very, very, very slow. So there's no moment where you feel this big reward, this big rush of, now I'm rich. It takes a long time. It takes years. Human hair, from the point that it starts growing to the point that it falls out, is about 7 years. You might not have known that. That's why hair doesn't grow all the way down to your feet. If you never cut it, it'll start falling out. After 7 years, each hair falls out. And that represents one phase of your life. So if you really want to be rich and you're poor right now, you'll have to sacrifice a phase of your life, 7 years. If you can really do that, if you can really commit to that, then you can be rich. But it's not easy. It takes discipline, dedication, a lot of boringness. And at the end, you won't even really feel that different than when you started. Because it's all gradual. It's like growing from a child to a man, to an adult. It's very gradual. Every day, just a little bit of change, and you don't notice. That's what getting rich is like. A lot of people fall into these traps where they see what the rich are doing, and they're envious. The rich have big fancy mansions. The rich are just sitting idle at a beach, drinking alcohol, wearing fancy trendy clothes. The rich have flashy cars, crazy vacations, throw lavish parties. And it makes you feel envious, and you want to do those things. And so you do, even though you can't afford it. The reason that the rich do these things is because they have so much money that the amount of money it spends to do these things is trivial. It's inconsequential. They are not spending the money that they have in any meaningful way. They're spending a frivolous leftover portion that doesn't matter, because the main bulk of their money is tied up in investments, in businesses. Their money makes money for them. When you're rich, that's what happens. Your money makes money for you. And to the extent that you spend money on your own lifestyle, on luxuries, this is with a leftover piece. And you can apply it to your own life, even if you're poor. Maybe you have some small income, maybe you have a minimum wage job or something like that. And you can think about where the money goes to your rent or food or all these things. And after all that, what's left over? And what could you buy that is trivial? Maybe it's not a sports car, like a rich person, but maybe it's a pack of gum. Maybe you buy a pack of gum and you think it's just trivial, it's nothing. And that's the level that you're at. And it's the same thing for the rich people. It's just that their trivial amounts are for cars. So if you see a fancy car and you think, I want that, I'm going to lease it, I'm going to take out loans to buy it, this is foolish. This is what keeps you poor. When you go on vacations and you say, I want to pretend I'm rich, I want to live in a palace, I want to have servants that come by and change my bed sheets, and I want servants that bring me food that I order. I want to not worry about money for these 2 weeks and just spend on whatever I like, whatever catches my fancy, because I'm on vacation and I can afford it. But you can't. That's the point. To get rich in a single epoch of your life, a 7-year span, you can't pretend to be rich. You're not rich, you're poor. You must accept that you're poor. Maybe it hurts your ego. You don't like to hear that. But it's true, isn't it? If it weren't true, it wouldn't hurt. So it is true. And like all things in life, the best strategy is to accept what is. And if you want to make a change, you push on it ever so slightly, and over a very long amount of time, it will change. And you can be rich too. But you can't be going on lavish vacations, or I would argue going on vacations at all. You don't want to get caught up in your friends or your coworkers going to fancy restaurants. A restaurant is just a place where you get to feel rich, where people serve you and you have nice food. But it's only whittling away at your ability to become rich if you really want to. You're going to pretend to be rich in the short term and erode your ability to be rich in the long term. This is what's happening, and people seem to not be able to see it. They just think it's normal. They think everyone does this, so I can do it too. And you can do it, but if you live like you're rich, then you'll always remain poor. You'll stay poor until you're an old person. So how do you actually do it? How do you get rich? You have to save your money. I know people really don't like hearing that word save. It feels dirty. It feels like almost like it's a violation of society or something. You're just going to save your money like some Scrooge McDuck? Yeah, you are. If you want to be rich. A rich person is someone who has money. And to have money, you have to have not spent it. You have to have saved it. People think of their income as though it's like a coupon to spend. Like, here's my paycheck. So that's the money, those are the tickets that I have at the fun house to spend on events and trivial pleasures. But rich people don't think like that. They think, here's some money for covering what is absolutely necessary, and the rest to save, save. Just build up that number in the bank account. That it doesn't make you feel thrilled, doesn't give you pleasures, it doesn't give you experiences. It just is a number that sits there and slowly gets bigger over time if you let it. And that's all. And they do that for years. So how can you do that? How can you save money? I know it's not easy. There are two main levers. One is to make more money, and the other is to spend less money. Making more money means doing everything you can think of to get a job or get a better job, a higher paying job. But this has limits. You can reach a certain point where you're kind of exhausting yourself. You kind of have exploited all of your skills that you reasonably can, and you've tried exploring all the different creative opportunities there are, and you reach sort of a limit. So for a lot of people, there is a upper limit on how much money you can reasonably make, even if people might tell you there is no limit on income, so you should focus solely on making more and more. And it's a recipe for stress and to destroy your life, really. So just do whatever you reasonably can to make a solid income. With an income, there are two options. You can either do the working for someone else route or the building something yourself route, and both of them can work. Doing something for yourself is much riskier, but if you have the certain personality where you just want to work really hard all the time on something that you own, where you have ownership over the results, then maybe that's for you. You have to fail many times, most likely, before you find success. You'll have to learn many lessons along the way, but if that sounds like your personality, maybe it'll work. I'd say go for it. But most people don't have that temperament. Most people do better as an employee, letting somebody else shoulder the risk and then giving you a predictable income. And this is much easier for things like budgeting, figuring out how much money will go towards your essentials and how much you can save. So the other side, besides making money, is not spending money. And I already mentioned not spending money on lavish things, on things where you pretend like you're rich when you're not. But it's also very good to reduce spending on the essentials. And the biggest expense for most people is where they live. You may not want to hear this. This is something people don't want to admit or think about. But the least you could spend on where you live is nothing. And it's possible. For example, maybe you can live with your parents or your family. Maybe somebody would welcome you to stay with them. And if you have the opportunity available, that is a great way to live for a while, to build up your savings. Maybe nobody will let you stay with them for free, but maybe they'll let you pay some small amount of rent to live with them in a room. That can work. And if you don't have anybody like that in your life, then another option is getting roommates, as many roommates as you can find. And of course, there's trade-offs. You can have all sorts of personality conflicts with roommates. It's not easy. but it helps you build some life skills on how to live with, tolerate, deal with other people in conflict. So it's not always a bad thing. You could rent a house with 3 other people, 4 other people, and your living expense for where you live could be quite low. And this is the biggest chunk of your essential expenses. So if you can manage that, that's a great start. It can really get you started in the right direction for saving money. And then there's food. Of course, the biggest thing that people do is eating out at restaurants, which is living like a rich person, pretending you have servants. So you don't need to do that. Just go to the grocery store and buy things to cook at home, or buy things in bulk to last you a while. These are great ways to save money on food. Transportation, you don't want to be driving the similar car that other people are driving wherever you work. You want to be the guy that's driving the old beater car that you got for a few $1,000s secondhand, or the guy that just takes the bus every day, because the bus is pretty cheap and cost efficient. So you could just not have a car at all. A car is a big expense. It's got lots of maintenance and gas costs. You can just cut all those out by taking the bus, or if you live close enough to your work, you could ride your bike, you can walk. Transportation is a big expense that adds up over time. When you're thinking about expenses, the most expensive forms of expenses are expenses that happen over and over again. If there's an expense that you have to do once because it's some emergency, maybe something on your car breaks and you need a repair, those sort of expenses are actually pretty cheap compared with recurring expenses, things like what you have to pay to commute, your food costs that you have to eat all the time, your rent that you have to pay every month. These sort of things are the biggest things that eat into your ability to save money. And then there's things like subscriptions to various services, online services, Netflix, and different paid subscriptions. And you don't need those. There's plenty of ways to be entertained for free. You don't need to pay recurring costs for some subscription, even if it sounds cheap. Oh, it's only $10 a month, I can afford that. Well, that's $120 a year. And $120 is nothing to sneeze at. So if you can build a habit to entertain yourself in free ways, which is quite possible while you're still poor, then that is the best idea if you want to no longer be poor at some point in the future. Some ways to be entertained for free would be walking around your city, walking through a park, going to the library, reading books, hanging out with friends, given that the friends aren't pressuring you to go out and do expensive activities that cost money. You'll have to find kind of like-minded people that want to do things that are cheap or free. So this is how, I guess you don't have, this isn't necessarily required, but this is the path. This is the path that leads to being rich eventually. And the problem is you may not like this answer because it may be inconceivable to you that you will exist in 7 years, but I guarantee that you will. And when 7 years come around, you'll appreciate what you've done for yourself. Even though there's no moment where you think, now I'm rich, now I can spend like crazy. No, even when you are rich, if you build up these habits, you'll still feel like you can only spend the small leftover amount at the end. You can only make small purchases relative to your total wealth. And this never really feels like a big indulgence, like it's really such a big deal, even though your quality of life will go up. And you'll feel that to some extent. It'll never be this big moment of finally I can do what I want sort of thing. And that's how wealth is built. That's how people become rich. just through discipline and through boringness. It's really pretty boring. In fact, this is why you feel envious of all of these rich people that do these fancy things, because they are showing them off to you on purpose. Because at some point, once you have everything, the only thing left for you to do is to show it off to other people. Because for you, it's become every day. It's become routine. Having your nice house, you get the same house every day, your same car, you buy a new car, but they're all you've seen them already. There's nothing really left for you to buy and to do. So the only thrill that you get at that point is to show off to other people these things that you have and say, hey, look, I made it and you haven't. I'm better than you. And this is, it's such a small thing, but people that chase money and get there and get lots of money and think they deserve to feel better, they're gonna find ways to try to make that happen. And one of the ways is showing off that stuff to other people. Get a little cheap thrill, thinking you're better than them. And this feeds into poor people seeing all of these things that the wealthy people do and being envious. Of course, that's what the rich people wanted, is for the poor people to feel envious. And because you feel envious, you feel like it's not fair. You feel like people in your tribe are getting things, are getting experiences that you can't have, and you feel bitter, you feel resentful. So to get back at them in anger, you indulge in these things like vacations or spending lavishly, spending everything you have on some fashion item or some car. But it won't fulfill you. This way that you retaliate against the rich by pretending to be them for a moment, it will only destroy you. That path will only work against your own best interest. So you must resist. You must see it for what it is. See these rich people for how small and petty they are, and don't fall for the bait trying to get you to feel envious and be enraged and waste your money. So save, save, save. And once you get saving, you'll start encountering new problems like inflation, eroding the value of your money that you've saved over time, because the prices of everything keep going up. That's just a sort of a law of the universe. So you can't just keep your money in a savings account or in cash in your house or something, because that money will buy less as time goes on, and it will work against your goal of trying to save money. So you're going to have to invest it somehow. And the easiest way is just to buy an index fund of the stock market. Historically, that's done really well. If you look at a long-term graph of the stock market, you'll see that it just tends to keep marching on up over time, even though it's scary. And it's possible it could have a big crash. You could lose maybe half of your money in that, or maybe even more. Who really knows? But what is the worst case scenario? Let's say it drops by 80%. You lose 80% of all that money that you worked so hard to save. You'll probably feel really angry and frustrated. But you didn't lose 100%. You still have 20% of that saved money. And that's more than you would have had you spent it all the time. And that's kind of a worst case scenario. Most of the time you'll have much more than you started, and you'll be on your way. And if you do lose a lot of your money in the stock market, in one of these epochs of time, these 7 years, you can do it again. You can spend another 7 years saving up just like you did before. Sure, it didn't work the first time, but you can try it again. And at the end of all that, it'll be 14 years. That's quite a bit of time, and no one wants to, quote unquote, waste that big of a chunk of their life in a goal like this. But I'm reminded of that story in the Bible. I'm not a religious person, but there's a story of Leah and Rachel, and I think it's Jacob that wants to marry Rachel and works for this guy for 7 years, and after the 7 years, he tricks Jacob, and Jacob has to marry Leah, which he doesn't want. He wanted Rachel. And now he's got to work another 7 years to get Rachel, which is what he really wanted. So it kind of reminds me of that story. Sometimes in life, you work a long time to get something and you're just disappointed. It wasn't what you thought it was. And now you got to take that experience with you and carry it forward onto the next endeavor, the next 7 years. And after that, you'll probably get what you were after. And I know it sucks. I know it's a tragedy, and it takes a really long time, and a lot of your life is gone after that point, but it will have been worth it, because the alternative is to never go after what you wanted, and those 14 years will pass anyway, and after all that, you'll just be left just like where you started, no better off. So if you really want to be rich, these are the hard, sad truths about it. I've gone through a lot of this stuff myself, so I'm very aware of how it goes. And I wish the best of luck to all of you. I know that it's not easy out there. It's not easy to find a job. The landscape is changing. AI is shifting how the fabric of society, how jobs are structured, what skills are in demand, and all of this. But that's life, man. It's a rickety bridge. It's this raft that you have to balance on. You have to constantly deal with the choppy waters trying to throw you off. That's life. So do your best. That's all we can do, is do our best. And maybe it helps to know that people don't really get rich overnight, even though it looks like they do. It looks like they just came rich out of nowhere. Sure, some people are born into wealthy families, and that's a massive, massive advantage and head start, and you may feel that's not fair, and it's not fair, that's true. But if you are poor and you want to become rich, there is a path, and that's the good thing. You're not stuck forever. There's certain societies in the past where if you were born into a lowly family, as they say, you're stuck there for your whole life. And maybe in a way that's sort of more soothing, because you don't have to strive. You don't have to feel like you need to do something to change your situation. You can just accept it and tolerate the pain. But that's not the society we live in. We live in a society where it is possible to move, to change. It just requires a certain personality, a certain dedication that I guess few people have. Only you know, really, if you have it, or if you don't have it, you know if maybe you could work on developing it, or if you're better off just living in acceptance and just living the lifestyle of a poor person, which is just fine. There's nothing really wrong with that, but it's good to know. It's good to be aware of what your options are so you can make the best choice for yourself. And that's all we can do, is make the best choice for ourselves based on knowing ourselves and what our skills are, what our personality is. So, best of luck to you all. I hope this was helpful.